All right, guys. Years ago, I sort of called what was going to be happening today, right? I held up a globe and I had a little snow globe. And I talked about this being the niche market, us people who collected comic books out of passion, had done it for a while. We were knowledgeable about things. And the little snow globe was us, and the world was the one that was going to come over here and see what was going to go on. And I kind of predicted that the comic book hobby itself and comic books were going to be a lifeless husk. Except when I made that video, hey, what's up, guys? When I made that video, I can get the big picture because I've always held on this picture that history just repeats itself. The human condition, we just repeat ourselves, right? No matter what it is. And what I didn't realize is that not only would comic books kind of be left a husk there when the world comes over and looks at our hobby and takes off to the next big trendy thing that they want to get noticed on and be a part of a community online and have a reason to get online and complain about things. But one of the things I kind of missed in the details, even though I had the bigger picture, was the fact that it was also going to be eaten from the inside, right? This is actually something video I never thought I'd really kind of make because it's just an observation. I don't know Alan Moore. I don't know his details. I don't know his life. I only have the details. It's the opposite of what I'm talking about. I don't have the big picture of Alan Moore. I just have the details through his work and his interviews and things, right? But there's been a couple things going on that sort of came together for me to make this video, right? We've had Martin Scorsese talk about the Marvel movies not being cinema. It's like an amusement park when you go to watch it and stuff, right? There's no cinema there. There's no passion, right? Then we've had Henry Cavill, I believe the guy who plays Superman, last couple of years. He's come to the defense online in an interview, if you will, of Fandom, how a lot have, between the Star Trek fans and the Fandom Menace, Comicsgate, anything, all this stuff like that, they're referred to as toxic. And even if you're just somebody who collects comic books and you stop buying those comic books, you're thrown into that. So he comes to it and said that is not toxic. That is passion for what's there, right? This is a guy that played Superman. He has fans. He has been slammed for being Superman. He's had people who want him to keep being Superman, right? So for somebody who's got this celebrity and has a handle on it of what's going on, right? But then there was a video and some other things have gone on. But the big one that got me was for some reason in my feed, I've watched his videos before. He's a YouTube celebrity. I mean, everybody, if you've been on YouTube at all, you've heard of this guy or seen one of his videos pop up. And, I've probably watched maybe like 5 videos of his the whole time he's probably been on YouTube. But it's a guy named Paul Joseph Watson, right? We all know him. And he did a video of the infantilization of popular culture, right? It's right there with the dude who cried at the Star Wars trailer for a thumbnail, if you will, right? And I watched that and I found it very interesting because they took pop culture in general, the Marvel movies, the fans that pop up online, everything that's going on, and they came up with this whole new word of what they're talking about. There's already a word for it called arrested development, where it seems like people who are into anything that they drag comic books into it. They drag comic books into it. And if you watch this channel, I've always said that comic books still have the stigma and stuff, right? But they had to drag comic books into it. Star Wars, anything that's pop culture right now, Marvel movies, superhero movies, everything, cartoons, Rick and Morty and stuff. Star Wars, they dragged it all in there. And then as an afterthought, they went, oh yeah, in the comic books. So I was sort of like, how are you dragging comic books into this? Hey, what's going on, guys, right? So the thing about it is that once again, like I said, comic books has that stigma. And once again, comic books is the underdog here because it's getting dragged into this stuff. The problem with it is the video I made years ago, for people who might have missed the beginning of this live stream stuff, is that here's the world. And years ago in the video, I held up a globe and I had a little tiny snow globe. And this was the niche community, the people had a passion for comics, not the toxic fandom, the people who actually had a passion for it. A word that was thrown around here when there was a comic book community before it got big with the bigger channels and stuff. The storytellers, the Comicsgate people, the people who come on here and talk about all these things, but they don't even have a comic book collection and stuff, right? We can kind of drop dimes, right? So after I take in all of this stuff, the way work is hit, I'm going to be working a lot and stuff. And I had a few minutes last night to actually sit down and grab out some of my comics. And I pulled out the very last series of books that Alan Moore is supposed to be putting out there with the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. This is his retirement. Now, I think he's been, I've heard for going on for like 6 years, right? And it's The Tempest that comes on. Yeah, here. Well, sorry. I've actually been reading these, so they're out of bags and stuff, right? See if we can get the glare off of here, right? And The Tempest has turned out to be very interesting, right? I'm halfway through it, and I was just sort of shaking my head because it is probably the weakest thing that Alan Moore has ever wrote, but not for the reasons that you think. We're not talking about, oh, he's just an old guy. And then he kind of half-hearted got into the series and stuff. But to talk about Alan Moore for a minute, to have all this gel of what I'm talking about, Alan Moore has been attacked many times for the Killing Joke, for the rape scene, right? Everything that has accumulated over the years with comic books, with SJWs and all the politics, identity politics, everything that's gotten in there and stuff, all started with a callback to the Killing Joke with a Batgirl variant cover that I mentioned here a couple times, where everybody came up there and it was a picture. The cover, the variant cover, was Joker standing behind Batgirl painting a smile on her face, and that was a callback to Killing Joke, and they said that it was rape. And then it was a victory because the artist even buckled, bent the knee, whatever, and they got rid of it, and that was the foothold that they needed, the victory that they needed. And comic books have been going downhill ever since. They were going downhill in quality since then. Now, if you're one of those people who have found stuff that you love to keep reading stuff, that is one of the mantras of in this hobby that's always been here, is collect what you love what you collect, read what you collect. So if you've been able to filter through this stuff and find the stuff, that's great. But my problem with the comic book fandom getting these videos and how they're now pulling Alan Moore on their side after attacking him for his Killing Joke book. I found an interview from Alan Moore from 2016 where he was talking about comics. He was very bitter in it. And that's one of the online things. After talking about Alan Moore just being a bitter old man and how, he did so much damage to the comic book community and even the identity politics, we'll say identity politics people and stuff, kind of against him. They found an interview that they've been posting online the last couple months that he did in 2016, talking about comic books and the success in the Marvel movies being embarrassing and concerning. And it's sort of like we're holding on to 12-year-old male fantasies, and it's right up there with the white supremacy and all this other stuff. I went out there and I read that and I was like, wow. The problem is like I said, I have details of knowing about Alan Moore through his work in the interviews. He also did an interview when he was doing a series of books called Century for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in the 2000s, where he admitted that due to his research for things like From Hell, for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where he read Victorian books and other things of pop culture and stuff, things that also influenced comic books and things you read in school or should have read in school. He pretty much said that he can sit there and tell you everything about Victoria, England. He can tell you everything probably about the 60s to the 80s. But he said when it comes to now, the present, which was the 2000s and stuff like that, he was completely lost. And I think he said he has to kind of turn to his kids. So when I was reading The Tempest with some of the stuff that he was putting in here that I'll mention, I have no doubt in my mind that not only is this a middle finger for a man with talents who changed the industry, had all these sort of opportunities that people would kill for, even just to have the talent in a pinky of his when it comes to his writing and thought process. And the guy can even sing. You can get on YouTube and actually find him singing in some bands. The guy's multi-talented, but it turns out to be a middle finger, more or less, to me, of what I'm seeing. Basically, we have three, we'll say females for now, that are our lead characters. One of them is a character who goes back and forth between a man and a woman, which is fine. That's it's in there, right? But he turns around and he's made James Bond the bad guy, right? And James Bond, as part of pop culture, has been under attack for a while for being a womanizer instead of looking at him being an era, in an era of his time and stuff, right? The James Bond films are coming out misogynist and all this stuff and everything like that. And he's going around and he's nuking everything. He's nuking the imagination. He's nuking the blazing world. He's nuking all this stuff as he's just sort of taken over and stuff. And they've made him the bad guy because he's a white male and all this stuff, right? Then you take this interview where he's sort of talking about the fandom and it being concerning about taking stories that were meant for kids and now everybody's holding on to them. Martin Scorsese talking about Marvel movies not being cinema. And I'm sitting here thinking, this is actually kind of cool because I've always held on that comic books have a stigma, a thing of their own, and they're always the best, in my opinion, when people are missing out on the good stuff and they're not mainstream, if you will, right? How can things have a stigma and be mainstream? Because we can go back to the Big Bang Theory coming on, the television show. When that television show started in 2007 or whenever it was, I started watching it after the 6th episode, and it's about a bunch of comic book collecting, video game playing nerds, geeks / whatever. And they were getting a taste of our world in a way. Of course, this was like hyper comedy characterizations, and not everybody's like that, but it was a good taste of it. It was kind of cool, right? It was kind of cool. They took these characters and they were going with it and having references and real talks and stuff that you hear comic book collectors talk about, right? Talking about the physics of Superman actually catching Lois Lane falling from a helicopter, how she would have been chopped in 3 if they had real physics to it. They come home one day after trying to go to a Star Trek convention and they had their car stolen and the world's pretty mean to them as they're trapped in the desert. And they come home defeated just to find that their girlfriends are all having a great big huge argument about who can pick up Thor's hammer and the physics of what they can do if things like that, and they couldn't believe it, right? So there's a lot of fun in that. But I got asked, do I feel like I was asked by some of my friends, some muggles, if you will, about, don't I feel like that we're being exploited? Like we all know each other. You know what I mean? Like I'm that comic book collector and out in Wisconsin and stuff. Like we know each other and stuff. And they were taking things that I guess they were assuming I knew about and that I thought they were being exploited on a television show. And I was just sort of like, this is fascinating. I was like, what? So to me, that was really the beginning of it. And then all of a sudden people wanted to be part of that, but they didn't have the passion. And then for years you had all this talk about fake fans and cosplay girls and people popping up, and it was like anybody being collected. There's no such thing as a fake fan. If you bought a comic book, you're a fan. I think what we're really talking about is the level of passion for it. Are you in it because it's trendy, or is it because you really have a love for the genre? So a lot of stuff has happened over the last decade and a half from this stuff, and it's finally coming to fruition as we go into another decade, to where now the fandom that's been online for the last couple of years, the things that have been happening with comics, it's an internet narrative. And we all know about the internet narrative. Wait 5 minutes and there'll be something else to talk about, and this will be forgotten. But it's going on now, and the rare thing is that it seems like it's been building, because all the people who have been involved, like in anything in Comicsgate or in these Marvel movies and stuff, it was the Joker, in my opinion, that broke those people. The Joker, the success of the Joker movie. It started with a Batgirl variant cover with the Joker, where they got their first victory. And when they couldn't keep a movie like the Joker from becoming a success, and now with the sequel, to me, it broke them. And now a lot of people who defended that kind of fandom are turning around on it. Thus, we're back to the husk I was telling you about that was coming. But it's actually, to me, it's a good thing. To me, it's a good thing. It's a purge. It's a purge for the hobby, right? YouTube with Copa, right? A lot of things are starting to change again as decade, and I predicted that years ago. I actually made a series of 3 videos talking about the SJW people coming into comics and who's the audience. There was 3 videos, and one of the videos I actually talked about how it seems like a lot of them really do act like children. Now, for half a second there, I was in contact. We're talking with a bunch of big channels because my video went viral, and it was very interesting to be around these edge lords at the time who had, they had huge hits on all their videos, and their subscribers hit in the 5 and 6 figures and stuff. And I actually got to be on one of their channels and stuff, but I backed out of it. That was not the way that I was going to go. For half a second there, I was doing it. It was the right choice because half those channels aren't even in existence anymore. Those people were kind of gone, as big as they were. It was a fad. It was just, reaction videos and call out culture or whatever you want to call it and stuff like that. But there was a bigger channel called Bearing where he ended up making a video that I'm convinced through the channels. I could get a little chart here of who I was talking to and who he talks to and all this stuff, where he ended up taking a piece out of that video. And he actually made a video of showing the SJWs acting like children, screaming like children, yelling at you and stuff. Now, I'm not really coming down on them. I'm just calling out what's happened. It's like an elephant in the room. People don't want to hear some of this stuff sometimes. I'm looking at it objectively, right? So to me, what's going on now, I hope does go on, right? Because if you have a passion for the hobby, the passion for comics, you're going to stick with it. For years, comic books had a stigma. In the 50s, with the seduction of the innocent, the Wortham years and stuff, where they were attacked in Congress and stuff, right? And they were considered garbage for the kids, and they rose up because people wanted to experiment with them and stuff. And then we come full circle to Alan Moore, because no matter what you want to say, Alan Moore grew up on Ditko and Kirby comics and Superman of the 60s. He loved comics, and he comes in there and he gives them credibility in the 80s. He brings the credibility in the 80s with everything that he's doing. It's like almost everything he was touching. Swamp Thing, V for Vendetta, Killing Joke, Watchmen, all the way up to From Hell, the ABC line of comics, playing around with Image in there. His last great work in my mind was a book called Providence. It's just the guy was always innovative and did his sort of thing. And then with that, he ended up building up his reputation. He was reputable, and then people started listening to them, and then we started getting details of his life. And he's a cautionary tale now after I've read The Tempest. He has a scene in here where they're walking through an old folks home, and it's actually a bunch of retired heroes that are old and senile. He's got an old Billy Batson sitting there saying Zam, Zam, because he can't remember his magic word. And as they're walking through there's a hero, a Captain Ultra or something like that, who's walking them through, and they're talking to Captain Ultra about like, why don't you wear a costume anymore? Why aren't you a hero? And Alan Moore is talking through this character, talking about the state of comics now. Now, just to add to this before I get in what is said in The Tempest here, Alan Moore a couple years ago did an interview where he was talking about how comics, he thought Watchmen and his work was going to elevate people, and he just doesn't think that there's the talent pool out there anymore in comics to be interested in. He was actually kind of ashamed of how comics have turned out and how comics didn't blaze through. Alan Moore thought that his Watchmen book was going to be a big old heroin shot in the vein to the industry, and people would write such great works that Watchmen would be forgot about. They would blow them away. So he did this interview where he was talking about the talent of today, and I feel like he was being very objective. I don't really think he pointed a finger at anybody, but of course he was being attacked. Didn't fit the narrative of what they wanted to do online. So we come around back to this where, he has these characters leading our 3 main characters or 3 antagonists or whatever, protagonist, whatever, through an old folks home, and you can play with the pictures that Kevin O'Neill drew in there. You'll see the Blue Bolt and Billy Batson and some older characters. And the superhero that's taking them through their tour, the ex-superhero, is sitting there telling him, it was like, man, when I was doing this, there weren't so many guys that were doing this thing as superheroes and stuff. Now there's so many that what's the point, and they're making little comments of like, what can we do? Just reboot the 20th century over and over in comics and stuff. It's all metaphorical about the comic book industry, the fandom, how comic books have repeated themselves, and it's because of the fans wanting things. But at the same time, Alan Moore did an interview in 2016 where he pushed this narrative that you hear from a lot of creators saying that we're supposed to give them what they need, not what they want, talking about the fans like we're idiots. To a certain extent, I totally get having an artistic vision and wanting to see it through and not really have it influence too much to push things forward. I imagine my thing is that um, I've looked at this hobby as an actual art form of sequential art. I can pull out books where the storytelling was fantastic the way they came through. I can pull out Bone 16, right? I can pull out Church and State of Cerebus. I can pull Jaka's story with Cerebus where he lost his mind. There's individual issues. I can pull out Hero, H.E.R.O. Number, I think it's number 11 with the caveman story. That was just fantastic. I've showed these books before, right? Frank Miller breaking with that negative space art style in Sin City. I mean, there's actual pieces of work. And then we get into the European guys, and you have to go Mobius. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I always approach this. That things have been going, but the comics are still seen as kids books, and that's where all this pop culture emphasis, it's for children, and the fans are acting like children and stuff, right? Now I've looked up with this channel over the years, besides being sidetracked a few times. I mean, I've been doing this for almost a decade, if I haven't hit a decade. And you putting out, it's not really an excuse, it's an evolution. You go through certain stages of things to talk about and stuff, and dealing with things on YouTube where it's not just simply putting it out. So you can be led astray here and there. It's only human. But on this channel, I can say that this channel goes against this reputation that fandom has for being infantile. You know what I'm saying? I've never embraced, and I've spoken out against it in a very diplomatic way. I've never embraced terms geek, nerd, those terms like that, right? I've never embraced the concept of boy fantasy and things that's gone on there and stuff. It's been, to me, there's integrity with this. And I've even said the saddest thing that I've seen with this hobby, at least in the last 5 to 10 years, is all the strides that it made, going back to Alan Moore, Frank Miller, Kirby, Neil Gaiman, Grant Morrison, all these people who pushed the boundaries, Warren Ellis and stuff, who came in and did the storytelling and really elevated the art. We've lost all that integrity and everything that was built up to give this hobby, some credibility, some respect, and it's all just been thrown away by a bunch of people who think that we're going to give you what you want, not what you need. What you need, not what you want. Yeah, let me say that again in case this comes to me. We're going to give you what you need, not what you want. What a self-righteous statement to make, for you to know that you have elevated comic books, been a part of elevating comic books to where it's more adult material, and then thinking what the adults need. Now, like I said, I remember hearing Joe Quesada say things about, like, if we had listened to the fans, there would be no Marvel comics and stuff, right? And I think that's a true statement. I think there's a big picture here. So here's how I look at it when it comes to fans, and the people who spend the money and who have a true passion for it, people who actually read the books. They don't want change just for change. And the people who make this, it's like what I tell families. I'm a social worker in real life. When a family is in crisis or they're involved with any kind of services I can bring, it's like they're at the center in the eye of the hurricane, and everything is spinning around them, and it's overwhelming, and their adrenaline is going, they feel overwhelmed and everything. And that's the comic book company, the people in there, because after making YouTube videos, like I said, there's things I ended up having to deal with I never thought I would. And then the fans, the people who spend the money, are on the outside, and all they see on the distance is this funnel of the hurricane, and they're like, they get to watch it. But the thing about it is they get to see where the hurricane is going. Oh my God, it's going to wipe out some houses. Oh, it's in a field. It's going to be okay. It's just going to depart, oh, it's getting worse. Look at that thing spinning and getting bigger. Oh no, it's going to go over a cliff, right? Sorry guys, but it's a symbiotic relationship. You know what I mean? You speak with the money. And nowadays, you used to be speaking the letters column, and now you have YouTube videos and Twitter and social media to let you know that you're screwing up. We're not buying your books. And you should be happy that there is a fandom out there that is passionate about it. Are there some crazies? Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. It's kind of like I'm just kind of laying out a realistic idea of it. It's not that I'm really picking a side, but I'm just saying some people have really screwed up out there. Now, but we get to Alan Moore and there's a cautionary tale here, right? And it sounds like I want to slam the guy, but maybe I'm just putting out some truths. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn. It's not a problem, right? But Alan Moore, with the way he is going out on comics, he had his daughter get on Twitter and I don't know what you call it, a thread on Twitter talking about how comic books have basically broke his heart. The guy loved comics. He grew up on Kirby and Ditko, like I said at the beginning of this, and how he quit his day job and started writing comics, which was unheard of. And he just put everything in there, and he kept getting slammed, and he kept getting lied to, and he kept in. He was giving all the reasons he has a right to be bitter, and how basically comic books broke his heart. And if you had seen him just get dismantled over the years with his work being, taken from him and made into awful movies and everything like that, you would see that he had a right to be bitter and stuff, right? Well, the problem with this, in my opinion, is that I didn't go through what he went through, so I'm not going to dismiss that. But Alan Moore studies magic. He believes in magic. He thinks he's a wizard. He spent, what I heard is he spent 5 years, right here's From Hell, the trade, 5 years studying Jack the Ripper and things. And then this time he was studying his magic, becoming, understanding spells and the universe, and, getting this existential understanding of what the universe is. And he put all that stuff into Promethea, and then he picked a little bit here and a little bit there. He put a little bit of it in From Hell and everything he was doing. And by studying and wasting so many years, involved in something that's not real, he says he was part of a seance where they conjure something up. Well, if you go back to the 1920s and high society and stuff, they were into the spiritual era where they were all doing, playing around with Aleister Crowley, and they were all coming in there and doing seances with snake oil salesmen and con artists and stuff who would real elaborate hoaxes on them while they were there. They have lights and light up on the table, and they be able to pick up tables with their legs or with levers, have people sneak into the room acting like ghosts and stuff like that. I really don't care. I don't have respect for something that's not real. But by living that bohemian lifestyle and throwing yourself into something that is covered in a bunch of darkness and stuff, a man with his talents and contributions and contacts, and could probably walk into anywhere he wants and say, I want to do this, and can do things like that. He ended up missing out on the real magic of life, where I think he could have ended up being happier. He might as well have ended up becoming a banker, because in his pursuit of not being normal and having the time and the job and the money to be able to pursue these things like that, he still ended up like somebody who got their dream job and ended up becoming jaded and bitter years later. It's a cautionary tale. I feel really bad for him. I really do, with just what he's putting out. Or we have a guy here who is so talented and so good at writing stories and narratives. Maybe everything that he ever puts out in interviews and stuff is a character. I mean, Alan Moore, if you look at it, he could have actually written himself into a book. He's such a fascinating character and stuff. It's a double-edged sword. So to me, comic book fandom, having all these videos come out, all these people kind of talking about the toxic fandoms and stuff like that, I think it's a great thing. I think there's going to be a purge, because to me, this is the climax and stuff. And after this, it's all downhill. And I hope there really is sort of a purge, because the best comics, to me, the most creative stuff is when there is some kind of freedom, when people are lashing out, or when people don't have so many eyes on them, or they don't have to pander to people in power. And when they don't have to, and then what do? They turn around saying, we're giving you what you need, but you're actually giving the people who hired you what they want and stuff, right? Get all the stupid stuff out of there, man, because like I said, I'm unique in all this stuff, all these identity politics over the years and stuff, the things that I have a huge problem with them because it takes away merit of a person. You know what I mean? It just because of your gender and sex and all that stuff like that doesn't make you talented or anything like that. The superficial stuff doesn't. And when it comes to like behavior and things like that, I have a BSW in it, and I'm always on things. Right? I'm trained. I'm also trained to know my limits. If I see there's something wrong here, I'm going to hook you up with somebody who's more qualified job, the specialist and stuff like that. So over the years, I've seen all sorts of absurd things and talk about. And in Paul Joseph Watson's video that I showed at the beginning of this, they actually came up with a new term. I'm not going to watch the video. I should have wrote it down. That they come up with this great new term that's talking about people who are stuck at like 12 years old and are really into fandom and stuff. And I'm like, it's not in the DSM manual. It's not in the DSM 4. It's not in the DMS 5. It's not real. I don't think it's a sociological term. It's a freaking made up word for the damn internet. And what they're talking about is arrested development. The irony of this is people don't know what arrested development is because thanks to pop culture, they think it's the name of a television show. But I call it Peter Pan syndrome. It's where you're stuck at a certain age. And that can be due to trauma. But the real life things that I've ever seen is that a lot of people are stuck right where they're at because that's the last place they were happy and they never grew old. This is where you get you freaking guys who are in their 20s and 40s and they still talk about high school football. The last place they were happy were high school and stuff, right? And that's what happened to comics, And that's the one thing I can say about fandom. A lot of us are kind of stuck in remembering when comics were good. I've said it before, the Immortal Hulk that's out, one of the best books out there, and one of the books that a lot of people are sticking to. When I read it, and some of my friends who read it, it's not that it's that great. It's that's a standard of how every comic book was every month, just about. You know what I mean? You're getting what we used to get monthly in a stack of comic books that cost anywhere from, depending when you grew up, from 35 cents to $1.95. It's amazing. And the cost of comic books have come up. These books are supposed to be for kids, yet they're getting $5. You got to pay $5 a pop for them. It's ridiculous, man. We're going to check comments, man. I can't believe I actually ranted 30 minutes straight, man. See who's out here. Kevin Kelly, that's when it was great. The Big Bang Theory turned into a soap opera. I actually remember when the Big Bang Theory changed and turned into Friends. The opening shot where Bernadette, oh my gosh, I got 7. I've watched almost every episode of that. You had all the girls in the bathroom peeing, talking about peeing and stuff, right? There was an episode where it opened up and you saw feet in stalls, and then Penny comes out and they're all talking and stuff. And I'm just sort of like, what happened here? That's when the show changed. Sequential Geek, no way. You on Miss Screen. Me, I can't read that. Hello to all. Yes, Sequential Geeks here. Shirley Tim's here. Gore Vidal is here. Non-comic book reader. I know who liked the Big Bang Theory. We're surprised many of us weren't geeks, nerds, and adolescents as represented in the show and in the Marvel films. Comics were conflated. Absolutely. That adds to what I'm talking about here. I mean, the irony here is I can talk about people writing a narrative of fandom that I've been talking about. The truth is that reality is subjective. We're writing our own narrative right here. I was at Great Brain Comics. I spent just over $100. That was a great experience. The music was chill, and the staff were not pushy but helpful. What do we got here? They're talking about comic book shops. Kevin Kelly, I'm so glad I'm done with Marvel now that Infinity War is done. I'll probably buy the MCU that's already started with the original cast. I refuse to buy Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, I don't care what side of the politics and stuff that you fall on. Brie Larson was wooden in that. I just don't think she was the right actress for the job on her merit, if you will, right? And it was one of the first Marvel movies that was just a generic Marvel movie. It was not a well-made film, and there was things. It was just not a good movie. I don't care if you get accused, and if you say anything like that, you get hate for it, and it's ridiculous. It was just not a good movie. Marvel's had better. And when it comes to the cinema part of it, Martin Scorsese saying that Marvel movies aren't cinema and stuff like that. Go back and watch Avengers Infinity War. And I said it when I was blown away by the movie in a video. That's the cool thing about YouTube. I have some of this stuff documented, right? The scenes that went on between Thanos and Gamora, that was cinema. You go watch that stuff, and I was just blown away with what I was seeing in a Marvel movie. To a certain extent, to me, I accept that it's a genre. I've always held that with movies, you need people who are experts in genres of movies. Horror movies get tore up all to hell, but they have their own rules and their own tropes and stuff, right? To me, if you're going to have a movie critic talk about a horror movie, they need to know about horror movies, not just treat it all like the movies and the cinema and things like that have so many genres on their own and so many little fandoms and stuff on their own that I think you need to be kind of specialized in that stuff, right? But the Avengers, but before I saw Avengers Infinity War, I would have got what Scorsese was talking about, right? So out of 23, 24 movies, I can sit there and talk about scenes between Thanos and Gamora where they've got a little bit of cinema in there. I mean, it's good stuff, man. It's good stuff. The stories today in former Marvel suck it, far and few between. Haller was saying how Immortal Hulk is just good writing, not excellent, but the bar has been so low in their narratives. I ended up repeating that, Squinchel Art. Gorvidal, Tim, I think that this is Gorvidal. Tim, I think that more is feeling when what novelists in the early 80s felt, the end of the novels audience. Maybe more is the feeling the same thing about comics. Absolutely. I did, like I said, I did say I don't know what's going through Moore's head. I don't know him. I don't have the big picture, but I have the details. I have the cherry picked interviews that people are throwing out there. I have what he's doing in his work in The Tempest. Like I said, I have interviews and stuff like that. And I really feel like some of the identity politics that he's shoved in this last thing of, I don't know if he's being ironic because identity politics has infiltrated comics like a freaking virus and stuff, and he's being ironic by putting it in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or if he's been influenced by his daughter. I don't know. There's things with his interviews that I could piece together and probably make three different pictures. You know what I mean? It's a puzzle where none of the pieces fit quite right because I don't have them all. Right. So yeah, absolutely. It's not so much it's an attack on Alan Moore. I just think he's become a cautionary tale now, which is sad. He had all the tools and all the talent to me in his disposal, where if he got now the darkness, he'd be much happier. And I don't think any of us need to turn in like that. What if former Marvel hires a bunch of people from India to run their shop, replace all the SJW spazzes with Indians to get their largest untapped Asian market, which is not as regulated as China? Sequential Geek, you're going way out there on me about things I don't know about. So I'm just going to kind of go on over that. I have no idea. I have no idea. I thought there was already a market in India. I remember seeing a Spider-Man advertisement where they got their own version of Spider-Man out there. So I don't know. Okay, cool. All right, man. That was pretty cool, man. But really, I mean, that's really all I got to get to the point. I could probably come up here and come up with other things to say. But the biggest thing that I'm seeing with a lot of what I've talked about today is that the biggest difference between me and some of the stuff that I see people talking about, a lot of this stuff is blown up for clicks and put together in a narrative in a way to where they can get views and clicks and be talked about and be internet popular and famous right now and stuff, right? So how serious is some of this stuff? I don't know. But there is a zeitgeist coming in where all of this is kind of gelling right now. And to me, I think we're seeing the first harbinger of the next decade coming in, right? This is the start of it. Now, what's it going to morph into in 3 or 4 years? There's no telling, but there's definitely some movement going on. And to me, I always talk about Cable. A lot of people talk about Deadpool with Rob Liefeld, but if you go back and look at the 1989, I think of what it was, the introduction of Cable was the harbinger for the 90s. And I feel like the Joker movie of all things has the harbinger for the next decade here. So, it's showing that, hey, things are changing and stuff, right? Okay. So, I'm kind of leave it there, man. I can go on and on saying things, coming up with more symbolism and stuff, but I just really think there's a zeitgeist again. There's some synchronicity going on here. There's some changes about to come, and I really do hope it's a purge. I think this is a good thing, calling out all the stupid stuff that's going on, all the people who decided to come over here in their world and get in our little snow globe and look at it and leave us a husk. And I also hope there's a big purge in the comic book industry and stuff, right? Because a lot of stuff has fell flat. Like I said, I consider this stuff an art form with credibility and stuff, right? Sometimes comic book is just a comic book and it should just be for fun. And then sometimes you've got things that you read and it's a freaking art form. Now, if it dies out, it dies out. You know, there's so much out there to collect and keep and study and revisit and stuff like that, right? So we're not talking about waving a flag and hoping that there's a change so this stuff survives and stuff. But I really think a lot of people have missed the point in the last 5 to 10 years of what this can be. So there you go. Okay, check the few there. Okay, cool, man. Why Not Arts popped in here. Love that guy for years. Sleepy Reader is out here. Some people are talking. So I hate to go ahead and end this, but I think I've said what I've had to say. And, you know, be excellent to each other, man. So, yeah, leave a comment, share, subscribe. We're going to hang in there for as long as we can until I get more information of what COPA is really going to be and what it's going to do. So we're going to tread lightly, man. So Gore Vidal, great to see you. Sleepy Reader, great to see you. Kevin Kelly, Why Not Art, Shirley Tim, great to see all you guys. Sequential Geek, everybody that's popped in here. And it's be excellent to each other, guys. All right, later.